It's round 23 of the F1 25 Championship, and we head to Qatar for our final sprint race weekend of the season. And oh my, what an important sprint race weekend it is going to be, because every point matters. Of course it does throughout the season, but definitely now that with that double disqualification, the shock double disqualification for the two McLarens with that plank wear under that 9mm requirement that shocked everyone. Well, Max Verstappen is now within 24 points, under that DNF range of 25 points to Lando Norris. Of course, Lando can win the championship here this weekend. He only needs to outscore his teammate and Max Verstappen by 2 solitary points to ensure it is mathematically impossible for them to catch him, heading into the finale in Abu Dhabi in just a week's time. But wow, this race, lots on offer for us. Lots of things to keep an eye out on. In particular, of course, not just the McLaren ride height, but the tyres as well, because Pirelli have done something unusual for this racetrack this year, and it could play a very influential role to how the race unfolds on Sunday. So firstly, let's have a look at the race schedule for this weekend, because of course it is a sprint race weekend. If you're unfamiliar, the Friday has just one practice session, and then we have the sprint qualifying Friday afternoon. A much more suitable time for us European viewers after the very early morning rise for the Vegas Grand Prix. Of course, we have the sprint race on Saturday morning with qualifying in the afternoon, where in between those two sessions on the Saturday, Parc Fermé is open again and drivers and teams can change the setups of their car. And then, of course, on the Sunday, we have the race. So the Qatar circuit is a unique circuit because it wasn't initially designed for car racing. No, it wasn't designed for 4 wheels. It was designed for 2, for motorbikes. So as you can see, there's lots of corners here, which is great on motorbikes, but not necessarily for cars, especially for fast cars like F1. It's very much a hot lap type circuit. Qualifying is going to be very exciting, as pretty much every single session of qualifying has been this year with how close the performance has been. But this circuit, personally, I don't think it's that great for racing. The main overtaking opportunity here is down into turn 1. We have seen some good wheel-to-wheel battling here, however, through that first sector, turn 1, turn 2, going side by side. We saw Lewis and Charles go side by side through there. We've seen some big incidents as well, particularly at the start of the race, heading into turn 2. So the start can be very interesting because it is quite wide heading into turn 1, and then it very quickly kind of narrows. Turn 4, we do also see some overtakes through there as well, but this race does have a habit of kind of fizzling out quite quickly, because you need a significant tyre delta here to overtake because of how many corners and how prevalent the dirty air is here through particularly sector 2 and sector 3. So we know that the DRS as well it's not overly effective here because of how short it is, as you can see. I'm not entirely sure, even with the teams probably running more downforce here than they are, of course, from where we've just come from, Vegas and other low downforce circuits. I feel like that DRS zone should be longer, personally, but we'll see how it plays out for this weekend in the sprint race and, of course, the race on Sunday. But yeah, the tyres are going to play an influential role here, as they have done at every single race circuit. If the tyre selection is incorrect, then we get boring races. If Pirelli have got it right, which is rare on the rare occasion, then we do get some decent racing. But we'll get onto the tyres shortly, because as we touched upon in the intro of this preview, Pirelli have done something that we'll see if it's going to have a positive or negative effect. I'm very interested to see how it plays out. And we kind of maybe did get a bit of a preview in the first iteration of this Grand Prix as to what we may expect here this weekend. I hope I'm wrong. But this is a track where it is tough on the drivers' bodies. There's not a lot of time to really gather your breath here. It is just full-on qualifying lap after qualifying lap almost. A lot of G-force is exerted on these drivers. And it's only that start-finish straight where they actually get to catch their breath, and then it's full steam ahead again for the next 16 corners. So now onto the tyres, and here is that interesting nugget of information. Pirelli have mandated that while, even though we are on the C1, C2 and C3 compound, the hardest range that is possible for this season, they have mandated that tyres cannot go more than 25 laps. That is their rule, because last year they saw that there was a significant amount of degrading of the tyre and that they was at the very limit. So for safety reasons, that is what they have done. As we mentioned, this track, from what we just saw with the track layout, there is no time to breathe. Lots of corners through here, lots of high loaded corners, medium to high speed corners. I don't think really there's any slow corner. The slowest corner is probably turn 4, where we have seen overtakes, and maybe turn 1, but even turn 1 is quite a sweeping right-hander, probably more so a medium speed corner than it is a low speed. And that means that there's a lot of load put onto these tyres, particularly on the front tyres. Back in 2023, if you remember, Pirelli actually mandated that drivers could do no more than 18 laps on a single set of tyres. This was due to issues and stress on the tyre around the curbs of the track, not just the high load that the tyres do take on. And of course, changes have been made since then, but it's kind of echoes of that. So it's 7 laps longer, but how will that affect the teams here? Because that effectively became just a 57 lap qualifying, and we have always seen, and there's always a comment from people who go, I just want to see racing drivers go 100% all the time, why do they have to do tyre saving and all this management? Well, believe it or not, that actually makes racing exciting when drivers and teams have to do that, because if every single race was just 100% all the time, we'd get more boring races than we would interesting and enjoyable ones. And Qatar was kind of an insight to that, because it was quite boring in 2023. So I think I'm quietly positive about this, to be honest with you, because the teams will have to... Some teams obviously are going to struggle more than others with the degradation around here, and they're going to have to make a conscious effort of how hard they can push on these tyres, knowing that there is a definite 2-stop, a mandatory 2-stop. So it's going to be a fine balance of when they push and when they save, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it provides us with some tyre offsets and some strategy offsets that gives us overtaking, because that is primarily what we need for, as we've seen this year, for any sort of really decent racing, especially at a track here where there's not variable lines that can be taken into all of these corners. So finding pockets of clean air is very tricky to try and offset that, unlike at circuits at Silverstone and Interlagos, Circuit of the Americas. So that's going to be tricky here. So we need that tyre offset. Fingers crossed we get it here this weekend, because we definitely need it at a circuit like Qatar. Now the weather. Dry and hot. Now on to my predictions, and I think Lando Norris is going to wrap up the championship here this weekend, and I actually think he could make it quite boring and he's going to dominate. Yep, that's what I think is going to happen. Some of you, of course, are hoping for Max Verstappen and hoping at least it goes to the last race of the season. Me personally, I'd also like that as well, because Abu Dhabi is a boring race and I'd like there to be something to fight for, because I don't care about second in the Constructors' Championship. Let's be real. It's all about the drivers. But even so, the Constructors was wrapped up ages ago. No one cares about second, and that's really the only thing to look forward to Abu Dhabi, if it's not wrapped up here. But I just have this feeling that Lando is still the form driver. And I think Qatar, as many people have said, is a McLaren track. Why is it a McLaren track? Well, it's medium to high speed corners, and the degradation is very high here. Which team has had the best degradation or best tyre management throughout this season? McLaren. And Red Bull, while Max Verstappen, of course, has won a lot of races this year, arguably more than he should have done, but with how good the McLaren has been across the majority of tracks this year, and still kept himself in this championship fight. And yes, he won here last year. I just don't see that Red Bull being as good as the McLaren here. That's pretty much the crux of it. And I don't see Mercedes or Ferrari mixing it up. While, of course, George Russell did do quite well here last year as well. Qualifying, he qualified second, and of course Max Verstappen got that one-place grid penalty for impeding George Russell, supposedly, last year. He started on pole position. I just don't see the conditions we're going to see here in this type of circuit fall into that performance window of the Mercedes or the Ferrari either. And let's be real, even if the Ferrari does manage to pick a lap out from absolutely nowhere, they're going to fall back in the race because lift and coast. So the Red Bull, why would it not be as strong as the McLarens? Because, of course, the McLarens have good degradation on their tyres. Well, the Red Bull, this is where their weakness has been this year. While the level of degradation on the tyres has reduced as the year has gone on and they've managed to get a bit more on top of the car, this is arguably, I would say, one of their weakest tracks. I really would say that because it's high deg here. The only thing that may save them is the 25 lap limit that a mandatory two-stop race, which we just spoke about earlier with the tyres that Pirelli are enforcing here. That may help them. That may be the thing that gets them out of the tyre degradation being an issue, and this being maybe a one stop, which McLaren would probably be able to pull off. So when there's always a two-stop race here, there's always the possibility of more things going awry, especially with McLaren's pit stops this year and how we know they've gone. But I just think Oscar as well, I think Oscar is going to find, finally, a bit of performance here this weekend. This is a track which suits him down to a T. Medium to high speed corners, lots of downforce required. I think he's going to do well here, and I think the McLarens could dominate. But of course, never rule out Max Verstappen when he's got an opportunity, and if he's got an opportunity to send it down the inside at turn one, he's going to. But I really do think that his whole championship hopes rely on him leading out of turn one. That's really it, and trying to keep those McLarens in his dirty air. But I just think, like we saw earlier on in the season, where even if that was the case, it would just be a matter of time. It would just be a matter of waiting for those tyres to kind of start to fall off, and the McLaren would just sit comfortably a couple of seconds back, look after those tyres, and then overtake. And I think looking at Lando as the form driver, he still finished P2 last weekend. Like at Vegas, which is probably their weakest circuit of the year, low downforce setup, street circuit. That hasn't been McLaren's strength this year, whereas it has been Red Bull's strength. And now that's flipping, and we're coming to a track where McLaren is arguably the strongest at, like we've seen at Mexico, where thermal deg is an issue. We saw him dominate there, Norris, and we saw him dominate Interlagos as well. Really, the only reason Max was so that gap wasn't wider with Lando and Max is because, of course, Max had the spicy engine in the back of his car. That's a massive contributing factor at Brazil. It's the second highest altitude that we go to on the calendar, just behind, well, not just behind Mexico, quite considerably behind Mexico, but that spicy engine will massively help compared to your competitors at the end of the season. And there's more emphasis on top speed at Barcelona, at Brazil, Interlagos as well, than there is here at Qatar, with, of course, only the start-finish straight. Everywhere else is medium to high speed corners. It's all about your cornering ability, and that's where McLaren's strength is. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a McLaren 1-2 here this weekend in the form of Norris. Now, you may be thinking, well, what about the plank wear issue? Are they going to have to raise their ride height? That's going to lose them performance because you want to run the car as low as possible. I actually don't think there's going to be any compromise to the ride height at all at McLaren. I know there is rumours going around about the coincidental timing of a certain material used by some teams. We don't know which teams, that was being coated on the plank, or the titanium elements which fix the planks in to reduce the kind of skid wear, supposedly, which seems a bit dodgy when you think about it. Not sure how that was missed by the FIA for quite some time. And I think that you have to look at Vegas. Vegas was a very unique track, very unique set of circumstances, where yes, they had interrupted running throughout the weekend. Not really a valid excuse in my opinion, because everyone else had to deal with that as well, with the interrupted sessions of wet weather and red flags. Everyone else was able to get through that race weekend without getting disqualified. So I don't think that's a valid excuse, and I do think it maybe did. It is valid in a sense of that maybe it did contribute to them not having enough data, of course, to go on their optimum ride height without getting disqualified. That I think personally they were chasing performance at a track which they've been historically this year weak at, characteristics that they've been weak at. over the bumps. We know they've been weak at low downforce setup, and they paid the price for it. And Vegas is not a purpose-built racetrack. While we have mentioned that Qatar is not purpose-built for car racing, it is still a purpose-built track that has a much smoother surface than the roads of the Las Vegas Strip. And the same will be the case at Abu Dhabi as well, at Yas Marina. So I think they're going to be absolutely fine. I don't think they're going to be, there'll be lots of discussion around it. But I think, yeah, even with maybe, raising a bit of ride height, and even with it being a sprint race weekend and only having one practice session to dial in the setup, this is a track where they've always gone well at. They know how to perform here, and this year it falls right into their performance window. And with Lando only needing 2 points to secure the championship here this weekend, he only needs to outscore over the duration of this weekend his teammates and Max Verstappen by 2 points. So he's mathematically impossible for them to catch him in the last remaining race. I think he's going to do it. I really do. The only thing that can really get in his way is a mechanical issue, is maybe Oscar colliding with him, which we've seen already this year, or Max himself in relation to Ascend. But I think this is going to be a Norris weekend, and it's going to be one which will be dominant to round off his first ever World Championship. Just my personal opinion. I could be completely wrong, and as I said at the start, I do want this to go to Abu Dhabi. So I kind of hope he doesn't wrap it up here, to be honest with you. And I hope it is a spicy weekend, as we've seen many in the sprint race format this year. Now, further down the grid, I haven't really got too many other faults. I've touched on Mercedes and Ferrari. They're kind of unknowns. You never really know when they're going to turn up. And I think Aston Martin are going to like this track. They like the high downforce circuits. That's where they've excelled at this year. So in relation to further down the grid, I think they're going to do well here. But another prediction is that we could see some more carnage. We've seen it plenty of times here in the sprint race and the main race, with there being limited overtaking opportunities, and especially with it being very tight in the first couple of corners in that first sector. We've seen a lot of wheel banging, and we've seen a lot of free wides and drivers not knowing where another driver is on their inside. Of course, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton last year, free wide. We've seen, was it Ocon, Hulkenberg and Perez, I think it was, a couple of years back, so into turn 2. So I think we're going to see safety cars. I think we're going to see some intrigue and some carnage in that sense. And of course, that puts pressure back on those whoever up front. So yeah, definitely one to tune in for, though. Let me know what you think of my predictions. Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? And yeah, I'm just thoroughly looking forward to this weekend. Of course, as always, join me for every single session for a watch along. FP1 on the Friday with, of course, Sprint Quali. So there is a session on every single day this weekend for you to tune into that has genuine worth and value to the overall drivers' standings. So yeah, who's going to lead coming out of this one into Abu Dhabi? Will we have a brand new drivers' champion, or will it go down to the very last race of this 24 race weekend season? I can't wait. We'll see you then.